It's been a long and sweet 10 months. And now, I'm lying on this cold gurney, heading towards the operating room door. In a moment, my sweet baby will meet the fruit of my love with the world's most perfect husband. My husband Minjun was holding my hand tightly. He leaned down and kissed my forehead gently, whispering in a gentle voice, "Minseo, stay strong, honey. Appa, I'll be right here waiting for you and our baby." My husband, Park Minjun, the man I trusted and loved with all my heart. I looked into his eyes and felt all the happiness in the world. But the moment he turned, his perfect smile vanished behind the nurse's back, and the very nurse who had been pushing me suddenly leaned her face close to my ear and whispered a terrifying warning, like a warning from hell. "Don't go into the operating room. Run away." Welcome, viewers, to the Leisurely Know Who channel. Today, I'm Lee Minseo, and I'll tell you the story of the day that completely changed my life. Dear viewers, at that moment, that whisper shattered my rosy world. A woman, about to give birth to her first child, faced a life-or-death crisis. Should she trust her perfect future husband? Or should she heed the terrified warnings of a stranger? My decision that day wasn't simply to escape the hospital. It was a desperate escape from the clutches of a demon disguised as a national husband. And that escape revealed a conspiracy more brutal than any movie, a truth so horrific it could turn the world upside down. To understand why I was so terrified, I must first talk about my husband, Park Minjun. We had been married for 3 years. He was the head of a successful trading company, the envy of all men. He was handsome, capable, gentlemanly, and, above all, deeply devoted to his wife. My friends always teased me, saying I had saved a country in my past life, so I must have found such a national husband. I believed them without a doubt. In all 3 years of marriage, he never once caused me any discomfort. His love and care reached its peak during my pregnancy last month. He treated me like a true queen. He never let a drop of water get on my hands. Every morning, he'd wake up before me, preparing a warm glass of milk and a nutritious breakfast. He'd personally research pregnancy diets and even come to the market himself to buy the freshest organic ingredients. No matter how hard the day was, he'd do his part, preparing a delicious dinner. At night, he'd patiently massage my legs, which were still attached to my body. He'd tell me, "There's only one thing I need to do. Just rest and wait happily for the day my baby comes out. I'll take care of all the worries in the world." I was completely absorbed in that sweetness. I thought I'd found the happiest woman in the world, the most secure refuge. I loved and trusted him without a doubt. That day, the doctor recommended a cesarean section. The baby was so large that he thought a surgery would be safer for both mother and baby than a natural birth. My husband canceled all meetings and brought me to a premium obstetrics and gynecology clinic in Gangnam, considered the best in Seoul. He expedited all the procedures, secured the best specialization, and hired the most skilled obstetrician and gynecologist to perform my surgery. Everything was perfectly and meticulously arranged by him. I lay in the hospital bed, slightly anxious and in pain from the contractions, but my heart was filled with happiness. Minjun stayed by my side, holding my hand tightly and telling me entertaining stories to distract me from my pain. Finally, it was time for the surgery. A young nurse came in and told me to prepare to be transported to the operating room. The nurse had a kind demeanor, but she seemed anxious and nervous. Minjun stood and gave Jaema another deep, warm kiss. "I love you, honey. I'll be waiting right outside. You have to be strong," he said, stepping back to allow the nurse to push me forward. He stood there, waving, his usual warm smile on his face. The gurney began to roll, and I made my way toward the operating room door at the end of the hallway, where the lights were blazing brightly. The nurse pushed the bed very slowly, glancing back as if afraid of something. When we rounded the corner of the hallway and were completely out of Minjun's sight, she suddenly stopped. "Excuse me, ma'am," she called softly. "What's wrong?" I asked, startled. The nurse didn't answer right away, but glanced around and suddenly pressed her face close to my ear. Her voice was fast and quiet, but I could hear each word clearly. Her breathing was ragged, and her voice trembled with fear like a whisper from hell. "You can't go into the operating room. Get out of here." After saying that, she immediately pulled back, refusing to meet my eyes, and began pushing the bed again as if nothing had happened. My whole body froze, and a buzzing sound lingered in my ears. Run! Why should I run? I looked at the trembling nurse's back and then remembered my husband's warm smile. On one side was the husband who had loved me perfectly for the past few years. On the other was the unfamiliar nurse's deranged warning. Who should I trust? Tens of thousands of questions raced through my mind. Was the nurse insane, or was she mistaken? But no, her eyes, as she whispered to me, weren't those of a madman. They were filled with fear, desperation, and even despair. That look was real. The gurney stopped just before the operating room door. "Mother, you're ready to go," another nurse's voice said, snapping me out of my tumultuous train of thought. The cold, double-glazed green door slowly opened. Behind it lay the world my child would be born into, but perhaps a deadly trap awaited me. What should I do? Should I trust my perfect husband? Or should I trust my intuition and the terrified gaze of a stranger? I had only seconds to spare. A decision that would change my life and the life of my unborn child. What terrible secret awaited me behind the operating room door? Were the nurse's warnings true? And could I have found the courage to risk my life and that of my child and escape from that perfect husband? To all the viewers who will be with me through this breathtaking moment of life and death, please subscribe and turn on notifications on our Leisurely Know Who channel to be the first to see the next part of the story. The cold green operating room door was right before my eyes. The wheels of the gurney stopped, and a brief but heavy silence, as heavy as 1,000 pounds, fell. The nurse's whisper still rang sharply in my ears. "Don't go into the operating room. Run away." My heart, once pounding with happiness and excitement, suddenly felt as if someone had grabbed it, suffocating me. What should I do? Should I trust the perfect husband who loved me for years? Or should I trust the maddening warnings of a stranger? My mind was in disarray. No, I must have misunderstood something. I tried to console myself. I thought the nurse must have mistaken me or had a mental disorder. I tried to suppress the anxiety bubbling up in my chest and recalled everything my husband, Minjun, had done for me, especially during my pregnancy over the past 10 months. I needed a reason to sustain my faith, a reason to prove that nurse's words were nothing more than absurd delusions. Then, sweet memories flooded back so vividly that the nurse's warnings seemed even more surreal. For the past 10 months, viewers, I truly lived like a queen. Minjun made me the center of my world. He wasn't just my husband. He was my nutritionist, my chef, my physical therapist, my entire world. I remember those early days when I couldn't eat anything because of the intense pressure of college entrance exams. For me, who was exhausted, Minjun stayed up all night searching hundreds of recipes for pregnant women online. He personally visited every organic market in Seoul, handpicking every fresh vegetable, every bite of meat. He believed that his and our baby's health were his most important. He told me I couldn't trust anyone, so I had to take care of myself to feel at ease. He'd prepare another lavish meal, then patiently sit next to me, trying to feed me even a spoonful. Even on days when I'd vomit everything, he'd quietly clean it up without a word of complaint and boil another bowl of soup for me. As my stomach grew, back pain and leg cramps at night began to plague me. He never missed a single night without staying up all night with me. He even took a prenatal massage class just for me, and every night he personally massaged my body. I still remember his warm hands, the way he gently massaged my aching back and swollen legs. As he massaged, he whispered, "You've been through so much, honey. Just hold on. Our baby's coming in a few months. I remember all your hardships." Those words, those actions, were more effective than any painkiller. He wouldn't let me do a single household chore. Everything, from the laundry and cleaning to making a glass of milk, was his responsibility. He insisted that pregnant women shouldn't do strenuous work or be exposed to chemicals. I called a part-time helper, but he couldn't relax. He insisted that only he knew what he needed and what he liked. Our house was always clean and tidy, filled with the scent of lemongrass oil, which he said was good for pregnant women's mental health. He even accommodated my every whim. If I wanted a snack from a small shop on the outskirts of Seoul, he'd gladly drive out in the middle of the night to buy it for me. If I wanted to go for a walk, he'd drop everything and take my hand to the park, supporting me every step of the way. Every night, he read stories to our baby and whispered loving words to my belly. "Baby, Daddy, you need to be quiet in the womb. Don't make Mommy suffer. Dad, Mommy is waiting for our baby every day. How could such a husband be a devil?" His love for me and our baby was evident in every look, every action, every little gesture. It was unfaltering. Everyone around me envied me. My friends called me lucky, and my co-workers teased me, saying my husband was a rare species that needed to be preserved. Even my grandmother, who lived in the countryside, would call and listen to my story, always smiling and urging me to cherish such a wonderful husband. No, I must be mistaken. I desperately clung to those sweet memories. The man who had done everything for me. How could the man who had waited more than anyone for the birth of his child ever think of harming us? That nurse's words were utterly absurd, utterly insane. There must be something wrong with her, I reassured myself. But why? Why did her eyes seem so sincere? They weren't the eyes of a madman. They were the eyes of someone who had witnessed something terrible and was risking their life to warn me. The sincerity of those eyes and the unreality of her words clashed violently in my mind. "Mother Lee Min-seo, you need to go in." The nurse's voice came again, pulling me out of my memory. The operating room door was already wide open. My wife saw dazzling lights, cold medical equipment, and a team of doctors preparing for surgery. I peered inside then, in mockery, turned my gaze toward the hallway where my husband was standing. His face was filled with concern for me. He smiled and clenched his fist in encouragement. That smile was still warm and perfect. The nurse's whisper, the fake happiness of the past 10 months, suddenly resurfaced in my mind. But this time, it was accompanied by the word fake. Was this other truly happy happiness? Or was this all a perfectly orchestrated play? I began to tremble. For the first time in my life, a crack began to appear in my absolute faith in my husband. The crack in my faith started out as a small crack, but it spread like a crack in a cooking pan, as if it would shatter with the slightest shock. And that shock was the nurse's whisper. It was like an antidote, instantly deciphering all the sweet words Minjun had poured into my ears over the past month, and forcing me to see everything through a completely different lens, the lens of suspicion. When I began to reflect on the past, viewers, I was shocked. Those months, so blissful as a queen, weren't actually as peaceful as I'd imagined. There were certainly minor incidents. But at the time, I simply attributed them to my pregnancy and my dullness, as Minjun always said. But now, piecing together the events, they seemed like a cleverly disguised murder attempt. The first memory that came to mind was around the 5th month of pregnancy. That was when my belly had grown quite large, making walking a little difficult. One morning, as I was coming down from the 2nd floor for breakfast, I suddenly tripped on the top step of the stairs. I still vividly remember that moment, losing my balance in midair and plummeting forward. I screamed and instinctively covered my stomach with both hands. There was only one thought in my head, Wagaya. I thought my mother and I weren't going to make it. But at that very moment, Minjun, who should have been cooking in the kitchen, suddenly appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He ran like lightning, stretched out his arms, and caught me just before I tumbled down the hard wooden stairs. We both landed on the floor, but thanks to his cushioning, my baby and I were completely safe. "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. He frantically examined my entire body and hugged me tightly. His body was shaking too. I was so shocked, I thought I was going to die. I'm glad I heard myself screaming. I was so shocked that I just shook and cried in his arms. After calming down, he helped me up, and we discovered the cause of the accident. There was a small transparent puddle of cooking oil at the top of the stairs, barely visible. "Oh no," Minjun said. "I must have spilled a little bit this morning when I brought the cooking oil bottles from the upstairs storage. I had no idea. It's my fault. It's all my fault. You and I almost got into big trouble." He blamed himself with a guilty expression. At that time, far from blaming him, I was deeply moved. He saved our hats, and he was my hero. I just thought it was an unfortunate accident, a minor oversight. But now, thinking back, a series of chilling questions flooded my mind. Why did it have to be a fatally slippery edible? And why was it at the top of the stairs, the most dangerous spot? And the most absurd of all, how could he have appeared at such perfect timing, as if he'd been waiting there? There was a CCTV camera in our living room, facing the stairs. Was he standing there, watching everything? Another chilling memory surfaced. I was in the bathroom when I was about 7 months pregnant. After showering, I reached for the old hairdryer we'd been using for years. But the moment I plugged it in and turned the switch on, a loud crackling noise and a strong current shot down my arm. I fell backwards, and the hairdryer sparked and gave off a burning smell. I screamed in shock, and Minjun burst in through the bathroom door like a guardian angel. Without hesitation, he swatted the hairdryer out of my hands with a dry towel and ran outside, pulling down the thick cover. "It's okay?" The shock wasn't too bad. He woke me up again, his face pale with fear. He scolded me for being careless that day while pregnant, then immediately threw away my old hairdryer and bought me a new, expensive brand-name one. He said, "There are too many old appliances in the house. They're dangerous. They must have shorted out due to moisture. From now on, don't use them. I'll take care of everything." I was once again touched by his care and concern. I felt so lucky to have a husband who showed up every time I was in danger. But now, under the light of that nurse's warning, the incident took on a completely different tone. Was it a short circuit? Or was it someone deliberately breaking it? And wasn't his appearance, once again, incredibly timely? Was he just outside the bathroom door? What was he waiting for? Was he waiting for me to be electrocuted and then, playing the role of a grieving husband, blamed everything on the unfortunate accident? 2 accidents, 2 near-death experiences, and both times he was the hero. Is this just too many coincidences, viewers, or were they 2 failed murder attempts? The first was probably a miscalculation of the timing. The second was probably an unpredictable failure, not expecting me to let go in time. And now, lying defenseless on the operating table, this was perhaps his last and most perfect opportunity to intervene. A chance to create a medical accident that no one could suspect. A chill ran down my spine. The past 10 months of happiness had not been a life in heaven, but a walk on the tightrope of death. And the person on the other end of that rope, ready to cut it at any moment, was my beloved husband. My faith had been completely shattered. It had been shattered beyond repair. Now, there was no doubt, only the terrifying truth. The nurse's words were true, and this was a murder plot disguised as perfect love. "Mrs. Lee Min-seo, can you hear me?" The nurse's voice came again, pulling me out of the maelstrom of horrific memories. "You need to get into the operating room right now. No, you can't go in there. You have to run. But what can I do?" The pain was getting worse. My strength was fading, and my husband, that devil, was right there, out there. My escape was only just beginning. The last shred of my faith had been shattered. There was no longer any conflict between faith and disbelief in my mind. Only one cold, cruel truth remained. The man I loved most, the father of my unborn child, was trying to kill me. He had tried to kill me at least twice, and this operating table would be the final blow. The operating room door before me was no longer the door of life, it was the door of death. I couldn't go through there. I had to escape, no matter what I had to do. But what could I do? I lay on the gurney, my body heavy, the increasingly intense contractions sapping my strength. Nurses and doctors surrounded me, and outside, a demon in the guise of my late husband awaited me. He would notice anything I did. Mother Lee Min Seo, can't you hear me? You need to go to the operating room immediately, the second nurse repeated, her voice slightly irritated. She and another nurse began pushing the gurney toward the open door. There was no more time. In that moment of ecstasy, my survival instincts and maternal instincts surged stronger than ever. I needed to create chaos. I needed to create enough of a commotion to find even the slightest opening to escape. Ah, my stomach hurts so badly. Please help me, I screamed. It was a scream louder and more excruciating than any labor pain. I writhed on the bed, clutching my stomach with both hands, my face contorted in agony. This time, it wasn't an act. Extreme fear had transformed into real pain. The pain surging from my chest, mixed with the contractions in my uterus, nearly made me faint. The two nurses panicked. What's wrong, ma'am? Calm down. Take a deep breath. They tried to restrain me, but I continued to thrash like a wounded animal. No, I need to go to the bathroom. It's urgent. Please let me go, I screamed, making the most reasonable excuse possible for a mother in labor. But you have to go into surgery soon, one nurse tried to explain. No, I can't stand it. Do you want to see me give birth here? I screamed like a madman, my voice unwavering. My commotion drew attention. Minjun, who was outside, heard my screams and came running. Honey, what's wrong? He ran over and grabbed my hand. His face was still filled with worry and love. But now, to my eyes, that expression was nothing more than a disgusting mask. I need to go to the bathroom. My stomach hurts so much. I perfectly portrayed the role of a wife in pain, tears streaming down my face. He hesitated for a moment, glancing at the nurses. Are you okay? The older nurse gave him a sympathetic look. Yes, you'll be okay. It could be the fetus pressing on your bladder. The bathroom is right over there. I'll help you get there quickly, Minjun nodded. Well, please. Honey, just hold on a little longer and let's go right back. He spoke in his still gentle voice. He still didn't suspect anything. He just assumed I was having ordinary labor pains. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. An older nurse and a younger one, supporting me as I clutched my stomach, trudged to the women's restroom at the end of the hall. As soon as I entered, I was quickly surrounded and finally found it. A large ventilation window high above the last stall. And most importantly, beyond that window I saw a small deserted passageway with the words "Emergency Escape" written on it. My heart pounded wildly. This was my only way out. Please, you two, step outside for a moment. I want to be alone, I said in a weak voice. The two nurses nodded and closed the door. As soon as the door was closed, I didn't hesitate for a second. I ignored the pain that was gnawing at me and the weight of my pregnant belly. I locked the door and, with all my strength, climbed onto the toilet. The ventilation window was quite high, so I had to stand on tiptoe, feel my way along the wall, and crawl up, inch by inch. Sweat poured down my forehead. But the thought of my child and the death trap that awaited me gave me superhuman strength. I finally managed to grab the window frame. I pushed the plastic screen with all my might. I then began to pull myself out. It was an extremely difficult and dangerous task for a mother in labor. My stomach was pressed against the window frame, and it felt like it was going to tear, but I couldn't stop. You're not out yet. Why are you taking so long? A nurse's voice came from outside. I was startled. I knew I didn't have much time left. I gritted my teeth and used the last of my strength to push myself forward. Finally, my entire body slipped out the window and crashed down the emergency escape. The impact was so strong that my vision went black, but I couldn't fall. I pulled myself up, wrapped my arms around my stomach, and started running. I ran down the cold, dark emergency stairs, not knowing where the exit ended. All I could think about was running. I had to get as far as I could from there. My escape was a successful first step. My footsteps pounded on the cold metal emergency stairs, mixing with my frantic heartbeat and my heavy breathing. I ran down without even knowing how many floors I had descended. The pain of the fall and the increasingly intense contractions washed over me, but fear was even greater. I was afraid of being caught again, of being dragged back into that devilish green mess. When I reached the first floor, I couldn't bring myself to go out the front door. Minjun and his accomplices would surely be there. I found a small back door leading to the hospital's backyard medical waste collection area. I opened it slightly and looked outside. Thankfully, no one was there. I quickly pulled myself out and ran again, hiding between the trash cans taller than a person. Meanwhile, in the delivery waiting room, Minjun's patience was wearing thin. When I hadn't emerged from the bathroom for 10-15 minutes, he began to sense something was wrong. "Why haven't you come out yet?" he muttered and headed toward the bathroom. "I'll go in." He knocked. "Minseo, are you still there?" "Everyone's waiting." When there was no answer, he knocked harder. "Minseo, stay inside." An eerie silence still hung in the air. Feeling ominous, he stopped knocking and kicked open the door, stepping inside. Two women followed him, startled. "What are you doing?" "This is the women's restroom?" But he paid no attention. He kicked open the door at the end of the stall and was speechless at the sight before him. The room was empty, except for the ventilation shaft, which was wide open. There were still wet footprints on the floor. "She ran away!" he screamed. There was no longer any tenderness in his voice. Instead, it was filled with the maddening rage of a beast that had lost its prey right before its eyes. His once warm face was now distorted with ferocious rage, his eyes bloodshot and blazing. "Run away! Where did she run?" One of his accomplice doctors, also running, came running, startled, carrying that heavy belly. "Find her! Everyone, scatter and find her! She couldn't have left the hospital." He shouted orders to his accomplices and nurses. "Call the security, seal all the entrances, and search every nook and cranny. Use whatever alcohol you have to find her." And then, viewers, a breathtaking chase began, unfolding throughout the entire hospital. The security team's walkie-talkies blared, and calls could be heard everywhere. Dozens of security guards, nurses, and even Minjun joined in, launching a massive search. At that time, I was crouching behind a pile of foul-smelling medical waste. I heard urgent footsteps here and there, and a voice calling my name. I sat with my stomach clenched and held my breath. My heart felt like it was going to burst at the slightest sound. I saw the true face of the nation's husband I once worshipped. He was no longer a husband who cared for his wife. He was a raging, ruthless hunter, driven mad by the failure of his plan. I heard his growling voice coming from the nearby Bohan agent's walkie-talkie. I checked the morgue and the underground emergency exit carefully. He couldn't have gone far, the morgue. He was thinking about that place. Right now, there must be only one thought in his head, to catch me and silence me forever. I bit my lip to keep from groaning. I knew I couldn't hide here any longer. My child, and I couldn't endure it any longer. I had to find a way out. At my most desperate moment, a familiar doll appeared. It was Nurse Hannah, the one who had whispered the warning to me. She glanced around and quickly ran towards me. "Are you okay, Mother? Come with me, hurry." I had no other choice. I nodded and, relying on her hand, struggled to my feet. She led me away from the main gate toward a small truck transporting medical waste. "Get on this truck bed. It'll be a bit difficult, but it's the only way past the security office." I hesitated for a moment, looking at the dark, dirty bed. But as I heard Minjun's footsteps and cries getting closer, I couldn't delay any longer. I gritted my teeth and, with Hannah's help, crawled inside. Hannah quickly closed the bed door, leaving only a small gap for me to breathe. The inside of the bed was pitch black, filled with commotion and the foul smell of medical waste. I crouched in a corner, clutching my stomach, enduring the pain and fear. A few minutes later, I heard the engine start. The truck started moving, and as it neared the security office, my heart pounded. I heard people talking. "Stop for a moment." It was Minhyun's voice. "What's going on?" "I'm on my way to dispose of the waste." Perhaps it was Hana who heard the driver's voice. I opened the trunk and thought someone was hiding inside. Minhyun growled menacingly. My heart pounded. It's over. It's really over. I closed my eyes and prepared for the worst. But then Hannah's voice quite naturally interrupted. "Mr. Park, what are you doing? Inside there is all infectious medical waste. Blood, all that cotton, needles, and things like that. If you open it and something happens, who will take responsibility?" Hannah's words seemed to have had an effect. I heard Minhyun swear, and then I heard him say, "Okay, let it pass. But inspect the other cars thoroughly." The truck slowly began to move again, finally passing through the heavy iron gates of the hospital. We got out. Our mother and I were safe, for now. I leaned against the truck wall, breathing heavily. Tears of fear and relief rolled down my cheeks. The breathtaking chase was over, but I knew my real fight was just beginning. The medical waste truck bore me away from that hellish hospital along a bumpy road. Inside the dark, dirty cargo hold, I curled up, clutching my stomach as it tightened. The physical pain and mental panic combined to leave me nearly exhausted. I didn't know where this truck was taking me and whether I could truly trust that nameless nurse. But at that moment, I had no other choice. Anywhere would be safer than staying there and facing the devil in my husband's guise. The truck drove for about 15 minutes before stopping in a quiet alley. The cargo hold door opened, and the dim streetlights flooded in, making me squint. Nurse Hannah, her face still terrified, asked, "Mother, come out quickly." "Hurry?" She hurriedly helped me down. I could barely stand. The contractions were getting worse. "Who are you? Why are you helping me?" I managed to ask, my voice cracking. "There's no time to talk now," Hannah said urgently. "Your husband might soon find out where the truck is. We need to get out of here quickly. I've called a taxi. It's waiting at the entrance of the alley. I'll take you to safety." She practically circled me as she staggered toward the entrance of the alley. A taxi was waiting there. Hannah shoved me into the back seat and hurriedly climbed in herself. She gave the driver an address in a different area. The taxi sped off into the darkness, leaving the garbage truck and a nightmare behind. Feeling safe inside the taxi, I finally got a clear look at Jaeyan's face. Hannah was still a young woman, perhaps only a few years removed from college. Her kind face and gentle eyes were now etched with deep fear. She kept looking back as if someone was chasing her. "Thank you, Hannah. Thank you so much. You saved our mother and son." I held her trembling hand. "But why? What happened? Why?" My husband Hannah muttered a few words, as if trying to muster up courage. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with regret and compassion. "Minseo, what I'm about to tell you will be shocking, but you need to know the truth. Your husband, Park Min-jun, is not the man you think he is. He is a devil." And in that fateful taxi, amidst the worsening labor pains, Nurse Hannah told me the horrifying truth. It was a story that stripped away everything about the perfect husband I loved and trusted so much. According to Hannah, a few days ago, while on night duty, she overheard a conversation between two men as she passed a deserted emergency staircase. It was a familiar deep-voiced man's voice, and the voice of a man who seemed slightly older. Curious, she hid and listened, but when she realized one of them was my husband Park Min-jun, the man known throughout the hospital as the nation's husband, she froze. The other was Dr. An, a gynecologist. "Dr. An, please do this again." Min-chun's voice was soft, but it was filled with meticulous calculation. Everything should proceed according to the old scenario, as if it were a very rare medical accident. Postpartum hemorrhage caused by the mother's fragile body should be completely natural, without even the slightest flaw. Don't worry. Don't worry, Dr. An replied, his voice slightly hesitant. But this time, the insurance money is so large, will it be okay? I'm a little scared, Minjung laughed. Hannah said the laughter gave her goosebumps. The last incident was handled so cleanly, wasn't it? No one suspected anything. This time it will be the same. I won't treat you harshly after this. This is the amount that will allow you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Hannah said she was so scared she couldn't even breathe. She didn't know exactly what the old scenario or medical accident was, but she knew for sure they were plotting a terrible conspiracy against a certain product. But she didn't know who the victim was. Then, by chance, she came across my Jinru record. Seeing Dr. An's name on the list of her husband, Park Min-jun, attending physician Dr. Kim, and the anesthesiologist on the surgical team, all the pieces came together. I was the victim of that conspiracy. Miss Hannah panicked. She wanted to report it, but she was afraid. She was a powerless, low-level nurse with no evidence or power. Fighting against a wealthy businessman and a powerful doctor in a hospital was like throwing eggs at a rock. She feared retaliation, losing her job, or worse. But her conscience as a medical professional and as a human being wouldn't let her stay still. She couldn't stand to watch a mother and her unborn baby being brutally murdered. She decided to act. She agonized over it deeply. Miss Hannah spoke to me, tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't know what to do. She didn't have enough evidence to report it to the police, and she was afraid that Minseo wouldn't believe her if she told him right away and that he would notice and act sooner. The only way I could think of was to warn Minseo at the last minute, just before she stepped into that trap. I deliberately pretended to bump into her, giving her an opportunity to whisper in her ear, "I'm sorry." That was all I could do. My whole body went cold after hearing Hannah's story. My intuition was right. Her whispers weren't madness, but a life or death warning, the truth forged through the courage and conscience of a strange young woman. I held Hannah's hand tightly. Her voice was hoarse. "Thank you, Hannah. Thank you so much for saving our mother and son. I don't know how I can ever repay this kindness." "Don't say that." Hannah shook her head. "It was my duty. What are you going to do now?" "I don't know when the baby will be born. The labor is imminent." I remained silent for a moment. "Before we go to another hospital, I need to know more about the previous scenario my husband told me about." "What was that?" I looked at Hannah with pleading eyes. "Hannah, you said it happened last time. What was that? Was there another woman involved?" Hannah hesitated, reluctant to speak further. But when she saw my gaze, she sighed and opened her mouth. "This is just what I heard from my senior nurses, but after hearing Monsieur's husband's conversation, I was convinced it was true." And then Hannah told me an even more horrifying secret. It was about a woman who had been sacrificed before me, a woman who hadn't been fortunate enough to share my fate. It was about 3 years ago, before I came to this hospital. Hannah began, her voice low as if telling a horror story. She said there had been a truly tragic incident at this hospital's obstetrics and gynecology department. A mother had died on the operating table just minutes after giving birth. My heart sank. Death? Why? The medical records indicated it was an extremely rare medical accident. Hannah deliberately emphasized that word. The patient had been informed of the amniotic fluid retrieval ward. It was a very dangerous obstetric complication with a very high mortality rate. The surgical team did their best, but ultimately they couldn't save her. The baby fortunately survived, but because it was premature, she was transferred to the neonatal intensive care unit. It was a truly heartbreaking story. My heart ached for that unfortunate woman. Yes, that's right. Hannah nodded. Everyone thought it was just a tragic accident. The woman's husband was deeply grieved, and he completed all the funeral arrangements, thanked the medical staff, and made no complaint. That story gradually faded from my mind. I had only heard it in passing from my seniors, so I didn't pay any attention to it at all. until I overheard Minseo's husband talking. Wait a minute. I suddenly felt a chill run down my spine. The woman's husband? That man, Hana, looked at me with pity. That man, the man who had perfectly played the role of a grieving husband who had lost his wife, was none other than Park Min-jun. It felt like electricity was running through my body. No, it can't be. You're joking, aren't you? It can't be him. You're joking, Minseo. Hana's voice was firm. I secretly checked my old records. The husband's name was clearly written as Park Min-jun. And the woman's name was Yoon Ji-ah. He introduced her as the Yakin woman. They hadn't registered their marriage, but they were already living together. Yoonji. It was an unfamiliar name, but now it gave me goosebumps. There had been another woman before me. A woman pregnant with Minjun's child and on the same operating table. But she wasn't as lucky as I was. She died. A rare medical accident. Previous scenario. Wasn't the previous incident handled so cleanly? Everything Minjun had told Hana now connected, creating an utterly horrifying truth. Yoonji's death wasn't an accident. It was murder. A murder perpetrated under the perfect cover of obstetric complications. And Dr. Kim, who had performed the surgery that day, and Dr. An, who had been in charge of the anesthesia, were accomplices. They had already done it once, and now they were trying to do it again with me. I sat in the taxi, completely lost. The man I loved, my handsome husband, turned out to be a serial killer. He had killed a woman pregnant with his child, and now he was trying to kill me and our unborn child. Why? I asked in a faint voice. It was a hopeless question. Why would he do something like that? For money. He's the CEO of the company. Even though I wasn't short on money, Hana looked at me with eyes filled with something even more terrifying. Minseo, have you ever had life insurance? Hana's question struck like a hammer, striking Jae-ri in the confusion. Life insurance. As I repeated those two words, a memory almost buried in the happiness of the past month came back to me with a vivid, chilling intensity. About 6 months ago, I was 3 months pregnant, stricken with morning sickness. One evening, Minjun came home, his usually playful demeanor a far more serious one. Instead of heading straight to the kitchen, as usual, he sat next to me on the sofa and held my hand. His voice was clear and filled with genuine concern. Honey, I've been thinking about it, and the thought of us soon becoming parents makes me feel even more responsible. Life is unpredictable. You never know when or what danger might strike. So, I, intoxicated by the joy of being a mother, innocently rested my head on his shoulder. Why do you say that, Appa? We're doing very well now. Your business is stable, and I've saved some money. What do I have to worry about? He sighed. It was a heavy, anguished sigh. He gently stroked my head. I know, but there's nothing wrong with being careful. If anything happens to me, you want him and our baby to live in the best environment possible, without any lack. He paused for a moment and looked deeply into my eyes. At that moment, I thought his eyes were filled with love and responsibility. I've been researching life insurance, and I think it would be a good idea for us to get one. It's not only a hedge against unexpected risks, but also a solid investment for our baby's future education. Listen, viewers. What woman wouldn't be touched by a husband who cares so deeply about his wife during her pregnancy? I was completely captivated by his thoughtfulness. I thought I was incredibly lucky to have found a man who not only loved me but also had an incredible sense of responsibility for his family. What do you think? He asked expectantly. I found a product from a very reliable foreign insurance company. The coverage amount was huge, but the annual premiums were also substantial. But don't worry, I'll take care of all the expenses. You just have to go to America and sign. How could I refuse such a proposal, so full of love and responsibility? I agreed without hesitation. A few days later, a stylishly dressed insurance agent came to our house. Minjun sat next to me and listened to the explanation. He seemed very knowledgeable and constantly asked questions about the coverage and terms. He explained everything in detail, even though I was completely new to this field. He said, "Don't worry, honey. I've carefully reviewed everything. This is a very advantageous contract for us." And I signed the thick life insurance contract without even reading the small, dense print or the fine print because I completely trusted my husband's choice. All I remember about it was the enormous coverage amount and the fact that if anything happened to me, the sole beneficiary would be Park Min-jun. Now, when Miss Hannah brought up the story, the memory came flooding back so vividly and chillingly. Yes, I heard it. I stammered to Miss Hannah. It didn't sound like my own voice. About 6 months ago. What was the guaranteed amount he asked me to pay? Miss Hannah's voice was grave, as if preparing for a final blow. I don't remember exactly. It was probably a very large sum. 5 billion won, perhaps. 5 billion. The moment that number left Miss Hannah's mouth, it was no longer an ordinary number. It was a death sentence, a bloody explanation of everything. Oh, how did you know? I already knew the answer, but I asked again in a faint voice. That was the exact amount I heard, Miss Hannah said. Her voice was trembling with fear and anger. I heard it clearly in the conversation between Miss Min-seo's husband and Mr. An, Mr. Park. Min-jun said he couldn't lose this 5 billion won contract. He trusted only in Miss An's skills. 5 billion, an unimaginable sum, enough to demonize an ordinary person. Now I understand everything. It's become crystal clear. His love, his care, the perfection of the past month, it was all a show. A show to reassure me, get me to sign that insurance contract, and then walk mere feet into the operating room. He didn't love me. He only loved that number, 5 billion. The child in my womb wasn't the fruit of his love. It was merely a catalyst, a necessary condition to activate the insurance contract and make death during childbirth seem more reasonable. What about Yoon-jae? I asked, my throat choked up. She felt the same way. Hannah sighed. Her eyes were filled with deep compassion for the one who had already passed away. After hearing that, I couldn't remain silent. I risked my life and sneaked into the old medical records room, and I found it. A copy of the life insurance contract that had been filed alongside Yoon-jae's death record. I think Min-seo's husband had submitted the contract for the hospital procedure. That contract had also been signed just a few months before her death. The coverage amount wasn't as large as Min-seo's, but it was a whopping 1 billion won. And the beneficiary, of course, was Park Min-jun. Now everything was clear. This was a serial murder scenario, perpetrated repeatedly and systematically for the insurance money. He was a diabolical hunter, a wolf in sheep's clothing. He specialized in preying on naive, unsophisticated women with simple family relationships and no one to rely on. He deceived them with the guise of perfect love, and once they trusted him completely and conceived his child, he had them sign up for life insurance and drive them to their deaths, reaping the benefits. Yoon-jae was the first victim, and I almost became the second. The pain of the truth mixed with my own, and I nearly lost consciousness, but I couldn't fall. I gritted my teeth and clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms and bled. The physical pain was nothing compared to the pain of my soul. That pain had turned into extreme rage. I must live. I must live and strip that devil's mask off. I must live and avenge the injustices of Yoon-jae and the other victims I still do know. Hannah, I held her hand tightly. A fire I'd never seen before burned in my eyes. Please take me to my friend's house. Hurry, we don't have much time. The taxi took me on a different route and took me to the only place I could trust at the moment. My battle to protect my child's life and seek justice was only just beginning. The address I gave the taxi driver was the home of my only best friend, Sujin. Sujin and I had been friends since school, more than just friends, we were like sisters. She was my only family in this unfamiliar city called Seoul. I lost my parents at a young age and was raised by my grandmother, so I didn't have many friends. But having a friend like Sujin was enough. She was the complete opposite of me. Whereas I was quiet and introverted, Sujin was strong, direct, and sharp. She was now a renowned investigative reporter for a leading daily newspaper. I knew that the only person who could help me in this situation was Sujin. The taxi stopped in front of the old apartment complex where Sujin lived alone. She loved the freedom of life and didn't want to be tied down by marriage yet. I paid the taxi fare, and, with Hannah's help, we went up to Sujin's third-floor apartment. The contractions were getting worse, and each step up was torture for me. Ding-dong. Hannah rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, the door opened and Sujin appeared. Her hair was still a bit disheveled in her pajamas. Seeing me, pale with pain, drenched in sweat and pregnant, she was shocked. Minseo, what the hell are you doing? Why are you here at this hour? Aren't you supposed to be getting better? Sujin, please save me. I managed to utter those few words before my body gave out and I nearly collapsed. Sujin and Hannah hastily carried me into the house and laid me down on the long sofa. Sujin hurriedly brought water and a towel. What's going on? Tell me, where is my husband, and why did you leave me alone like this? I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. I simply looked at Hannah, pleading for help. Hannah understood. She wiped my sweat and began to tell Sujin the entire horrific story. From the whispers at the hospital, to the suffocating escape, to the secret of my dead wife, and the 5 billion won insurance contract. Sujin sat across from me and listened quietly. The girl's expression shifted from surprise to horror, then from horror to unconcealable anger. The sharp reporter's eyes burned like flames. The girl clenched her hands into fists. After Hannah finished telling her story, Sujin remained silent. She stood and paced around the room, her expression deep in thought. Only after a long moment did she stop and look me in the eye. Minseo, can we really trust what this nurse is saying? I believe her. I replied in a weak voice. I remembered all the past incidents and even the insurance contracts. Everything fits together. Hearing my words, Sujin no longer hesitated. That crazy bastard. He's not even human. She gritted her teeth and spat out curses. They were curses I had never heard before. I thought something was strange from the beginning. Men who are too perfect and too handsome usually have problems. But I never imagined he would be such a devil. Sujin came over to me and tightly grasped my hand. Minseo, don't be scared. I'm here. I will never let that guy harm you or the baby. And I promise you, I will use everything I have to expose that bastard's true face to the world and make him pay for the crimes he committed. Sujin's strong and resolute words were like a tranquilizer to me. I knew I was no longer alone. I had a brave benefactor, Hannah, and a sharp reporter and best friend, Sujin. Now, the first thing we need to do is ensure your safety and the baby's safety. I'll contact a doctor I trust very much. He runs a private clinic. Let's transfer you there right away. It'll be much safer and more confidential than a hospital. My mission must be conducted absolutely safely. The girl quickly made a call, and just 15 minutes later, a private ambulance arrived below the apartment complex. I boarded the car, under the care of my trusted medical team. Hannah was with me. She said she couldn't return to the hospital, fearing retaliation from Minjan. On the way to the hospital, the contractions intensified, but I gritted my teeth and held on. I looked at Sujin, and she was still holding my hand tightly. Sujin, what are we going to do after I give birth? Sujin looked at me with a determined gaze. After you give birth, that's when our war truly begins. I'll search all of Seoul to find evidence of that bastard's crimes. Trust me, I nodded. A surge of faith surged through me. I knew the road ahead would be arduous, but I was no longer afraid. For my child, for Yoon Ji-ah, and for myself, I would fight to the end. The private hospital that Sujin had introduced me to was extremely safe and confidential. There, under the dedicated care of the trustworthy medical staff, I gave birth to a healthy, beautiful son. Both mother and baby were healthy. The moment I held my child in my arms and heard his first cry, all the pain and fear within me melted away. I cried, but they were tears of happiness and gratitude. My son, my beloved baby angel, was the very reason I had to keep fighting, the source of my strength. While I was recovering in the hospital, Soo-jin began her own investigation. He didn't waste a single second. With the sharp intuition and decisive reporting skills of an investigative reporter, she began to peel away the layers of the perfect man Park Min-jun. And the truth Soo-jin uncovered was far more horrifying and shocking than I and Nurse Hannah could have imagined. This wasn't simply the story of a wicked husband who committed murder for money. This was the story of a true devil, a professional conman who had orchestrated a crime with incredible sophistication and brutality. Soo-jin's investigation began with the name of the victim, Yoon Ji-ah, who had died 2 years earlier. He mobilized his connections within the insurance industry and the police to access her insurance claim documents. And from the very first page, something fatally strange was revealed. Yoon Ji-ah's personal information, especially her family and relatives, was either blank or filled with extremely vague information that couldn't be verified. She was portrayed as an orphan with no one to turn to. "Look, Min-seo," Soo-jin said over the phone. Her voice was deep in thought. This was the point. He didn't target just anyone. He specialized in women with simple family relationships, few or no relatives. Why? Because when they died, there was no one to cry for them, no one to question them, no one to demand justice. Soo-jin's analysis stabbed me in the heart like a dagger. I was horrified. I, too, was the perfect prey for his standards. I had lost both parents, and my only blood relative was my elderly grandmother in the countryside. He saw in me not love, but opportunity, the perfect victim for his scenario. Soo-jin didn't stop there, delving deeper into Park Min-jun's past. She tracked all his financial transactions, his bank accounts, stock trading records, even business relationships. And another shocking truth was revealed. Park Min-jun wasn't the competent financial expert he boasted about. The trading company he headed was actually a shell company, a money laundering operation. All his assets, including his luxury apartment and imported cars, weren't acquired through legitimate business. So where did the money come from? The answer was insurance contracts. And Yoon Ji-ah wasn't the first victim. After examining all the records of high-value life insurance claims over the past decade and comparing them with suspicious accident and death records, Soo-jin uncovered a terrifyingly recurring pattern of crime. The first victim wasn't Yoon Ji-ah, but a woman named Hae-run. 7 years ago, she too was an orphan working as a flight attendant. She died in a tragic car accident. The person behind the wheel that day was Park Min-jun. He suffered only minor injuries, and she never returned. The cause of the accident was ruled to be reckless driving. After her death, Min-jun inherited nearly 1 billion won in insurance money. The second victim was a woman named So Yeon. 5 years ago, she was a kind-hearted kindergarten teacher with a family in the countryside. Tragically, she drowned during a trip with her fiancé, Park Min-jun. Her death was ruled a result of a cramp while swimming. And once again, Min-jun collected a huge insurance payout, this time 1.5 billion won. And 3 years ago, Yoon Ji-ah's medical accident resulted in 2 billion won. All the victims had something in common. They were young and beautiful, had simple families, and had no relatives around them to interfere. And all the deaths were perfectly disguised as accidents or tragic events, leaving no traces or suspicions. My perfect husband, Park Min-ru, turned out to be a devil in human form, a modern-day Bluebeard. He didn't kill his wife out of jealousy. He killed them for money. He viewed the women who loved and trusted him as mere tools for his pathological accumulating schemes. He built his wealth and career on the graves of innocent women, on their blood and tears. I trembled at the truth Soo-jin told me over the phone. My anger had now turned to extreme fear. I wasn't simply married to a murderer. I was married to a monstrous, cold-blooded serial killer. Sujin, what should I do now? I asked, my voice cracked. Calm down, Minseo. Sujin's voice remained firm over the phone. Now we have the full picture. But these are just our speculations and connections. To expose this to the world and make him pay, we need irrefutable evidence. We need witnesses. First, we need to find the families of those victims, especially Yoon Ji-a's family. They're the most recent. They could definitely provide important clues. Find Yoon Ji-a's family. With all the information on paper manipulated, it was no easy task. But for Sujin, an investigative reporter, nothing was impossible. She embarked on a new journey. A journey to trace the past, uncover buried voices, and restore justice to the souls of those wronged. While my son and I were safely protected at a private hospital, Sujin embarked on a journey to find traces of Yoon Ji-a. It was like finding half a thing in a sandy beach. Every piece of information in her medical records and insurance documents had been cleverly manipulated by Park Min-jun. He intentionally erased all traces, turning Yoon Ji-a into a rootless orphan, making her impossible to find after her death. But he was too swayed by the reporter's tenacity. Sujin didn't start with the fabricated information. She started with a very small clue, a clue that even Park Min-jun himself probably hadn't anticipated. It was the last photo Yoon Ji-a posted on social media a few days before her death. In the photo, she was in front of a small cafe with beautiful northern Vilia vines. And the caption, "Peace is here, in your mother's arms," was written alongside it. Peace is right here. This meant it wasn't a noisy Seoul cafe, it was her hometown. Sujin zoomed in on the photo, trying to discern even the smallest details. Finally, she spotted the name of a county written in tiny letters on the cafe sign. It was a small county in a remote rural area. Without hesitation, Cho Jin boarded a bus there alone. The child wandered the small county all day, asking people with Yoon Ji-a's photo, and finally luck struck. A tea shop owner recognized the woman in the photo. She was Ji-a. She was the daughter of the Han couple who lived at the edge of the village. She was a beautiful and kind child. I heard she went to Seoul to earn money and found a good husband, but her life was short. They said she died young. Finally, they found her. Yoon Ji-a wasn't an orphan. She had a family. A poor family from a remote countryside. Sujin went to the Han couple's house. It was a shabby one-story house nestled by a small river. Sujin was greeted by an elderly couple, deeply wrinkled from a hard life and the grief of losing a child. When Sujin introduced herself as a reporter and said she was researching their daughter, the couple was surprised, but quickly invited her into their home. On the altar sat a memorial photo of Yoon Ji-a. Seeing that bright, beautiful smile, it was hard to believe her life had ended so tragically. Then the couple told Sujin their daughter's story. It was a story filled with tears and deception. Yoon Ji-a was the pride of her family, a proud mother who excelled academically and was beautiful. After graduating from college, she moved to Seoul to work, dreaming of helping her parents and siblings. It was there that she met Min-jun. In the couple's story, Min-jun was portrayed as a prince. He was handsome, wealthy, and deeply in love with Ji-ha. He visited their country home several times to greet her, and each time, he brought her gifts and treated her with courtesy. He promised Ji-ha a wealthy life and promised to take care of her family. The couple trusted him completely and were delighted that their daughter had found the right partner. Then Ji-ha became pregnant and Min-jun was overjoyed. He promised a grand wedding soon, but then tragedy struck. One day, the couple received a call from Min-jun. He told them Ji-ha had died on the operating table from a rare complication. It felt like the sky was falling. Mrs. Hansi sobbed, her eyes welling with tears. We hurriedly boarded a bus to Seoul. Mr. Park had made all the funeral arrangements. He knelt before us, weeping, and blamed himself for not being able to properly care for his wife and child. Seeing her suffering so much, we couldn't bear to resent her. Mr. Han continued, his voice hoarse. He had prepared our daughter's funeral with great care. He then gave us a large sum of 100 million won. He said it was a token of his sincerity that he wanted to support us in place of our daughter. He even asked me to think of him as his close friend. He told us not to be too sad and to consider our daughter's misfortune. How could we have suspected such a kind and just child? 100 million won was a staggering sum for a poor family. He had used his daughter's blood money to buy their silence. He had performed a perfect act of grief, leaving even the victim's parents without the slightest suspicion. They actually considered him a good son-in-law and benefactor. Sujin felt both anger and sadness upon hearing the story. The boy carefully began to tell the couple the truth. About me, the 5 billion won insurance policy for my unborn child, and the previous scenario she had learned about. At first, they didn't believe him for a second. They thought Sujin was fabricating the story to attract a good son-in-law. But when Sujin showed them the evidence, the insurance, the documents, and articles about other suspicious incidents, they began to waver. And when Sujin played the recorded voice of a woman who, like her, had to flee from her perfect husband while pregnant, they were completely shaken. Mrs. Hansi collapsed to the floor, her heart wrenching with sobs. "Follow me, Jiha, how could you have died so unjustly?" Mr. Han sat in his chair, his face covered with his hands, his bony shoulders trembled slightly. The truth was revealed, but it was utterly cruel and harsh. Not only had they lost their daughter and grandchild, but they had been thoroughly deceived and manipulated by their daughter's killer for the past 3 years. The grief and anger were overwhelming. "Reporter, sir, what do you intend to do now?" Mr. Han raised his head. A flame of hatred burned in his bloodshot eyes. "I want to drag that bastard out of this world," Sujin answered firmly. "I want to make him pay for his crimes, but to do that, I need your help. Will you join me in seeking justice for Jiha?" Mr. Hansi looked at each other and nodded resolutely. Their tears had turned to resolve. They would remain silent no longer. "They will rise up alongside me, another victim, and tear off that demon's mask." The victims' voices finally began to erupt. "Meeting Yoon Jae's parents marked a decisive turning point in our fight. I was no longer fighting alone. By my side were the sharp-witted journalist Sujin and the courageous witness Hannah, and now, even the family of another victim, filled with grief and anger, joined us. We were united in solidarity. A solidarity forged by tears, loss, and a firm resolve to make Park Min-jun pay for his crimes." After returning from there, Sujin immediately arranged a secret meeting. We gathered together Sujin, Yoon Jae's parents, and I. When I first met the parents of my daughter, unjustly killed by the same man, my heart swelled with boundless sorrow. Mrs. Han, Jia's mother, held me close. The two of us wept together. My tears were tears of terror, of escaping the brink of death, and hers were tears of sorrow, of the loss of a child for whom nothing can compensate. We were victims, sacrificed to the same demon, in different times and places. After the emotional moment, Sujin brought us back to reality. "Now is not the time to be sad," she said in a serious voice. "We have witnesses, case records, and connections between the victims. Theoretically, we could report it to the police right now." But she paused for a moment and looked straight at me. "Min-jun is a cunning vixen, Min-seo. He committed at least 3 murders without leaving a single piece of direct evidence. Every death was disguised as an accident. If we report it now, he'll be caught. He'll hire the best lawyer to get away with it. The investigation will be incredibly long, and it's not even certain he'll get the maximum sentence. We need something irrefutable, his confession. We need a confession straight from his mouth." Sujin was absolutely right. We realized that to give that demon the punishment he deserved, we couldn't rely solely on circumstantial evidence. We had to set a trap, a final touch to make him shed his perfect mask. And then a bold and meticulously calculated plan was hatched. We were all involved. Yoon Jae's parents played the role of the people who were cornered. Sujin orchestrated the entire situation and contacted the police, and I became the bait. The plan was set in motion. First, Yoon Jia's parents, following Soo Jin's instructions, started making a fuss. They didn't bother to visit Min Jun. Instead, they repeatedly called him, tearfully explaining that they'd heard disturbing stories about their daughter's death from a reporter. They were deeply distraught and demanded to meet and talk. Min Jun initially acted calmly. He continued to offer soothing and comforting words, promising to investigate. But as the calls became more frequent and Jiha's father began to hint at a medical malpractice claim, he began to lose patience. The detective Soo Jin hired reported that he seemed very anxious and was constantly calling someone, perhaps an accomplice within the hospital. When the prey began to show signs of confusion, it was my turn, the bait, to step forward. Using a portable phone and a brand new SIM card, I sent him a single text message. It was brief but enough to make him uneasy. The message read, "Mr. Park Min-jun, this is Lee Min-zeo. I know everything about Yoon Jia, Hae-ren, and So Yeon. I know everything about the insurance contract and your conspiracy at the hospital that day. I don't want to make a big deal out of this for the sake of my child. Come out alone from the abandoned warehouse in X-Hanjiu tomorrow at 8 p.m. Let's negotiate. If you don't come out or report me, all the evidence I have will be handed over to the investigation team. The choice is yours." Dear viewers, I staked everything on this message. I've targeted his two biggest vulnerabilities, greed and fear. He had just lost 5 billion won in insurance money. Now, with all his crimes exposed, he's lost everything and faces the threat of execution. Greed and the fear of punishment will drive him. He won't stay still. And just as I expected, a few minutes later, I received a reply from him. It was just one word, "Good." He asked if I believed him. But Soo Jin and I knew he wasn't coming to negotiate. For a demon accustomed to killing for silence, the concept of negotiation didn't exist. He was out to eliminate me once again, to eliminate the only witness who posed the greatest threat to his freedom and vast fortune. We knew the danger, but we weren't afraid. This time, I wouldn't go alone. Soo Jin immediately contacted her trusted detective team leader and informed him of our entire plan. The on-scene operation was planned in utmost secrecy. The location I had chosen, an abandoned warehouse in a remote area, was sparsely populated but ideal for an ambush without detection by the police. That night, I would go to the appointed location, but I would be fitted with a miniature high-performance recorder. And in the Jeju darkness, the eyes of justice would be waiting, ready to cast their nets. The trap was perfectly set. The bait was ready. The predator, so greedy and arrogant, had no idea that he was entering the hunting grounds as prey, not the hunter. Tomorrow night's fateful encounter would be the final judgment for all his sins. Night had settled over Hangzhou, and a salty sea breeze and a biting chill lingered. The abandoned warehouse, plunged into darkness, felt like a gigantic monster waiting with its mouth open. The air hung heavy, and the tension was so tense I could hear my own heartbeat. I arrived 15 minutes early as planned. Soo Jin and the detectives had already arrived and were hiding in a meticulously calculated location. The miniature recorder hidden under my collar was already on. I stood alone in the wide open space of Changom, acting as a woman terrified waiting for the negotiations. At exactly 8 o'clock, a black luxury sedan slowly pulled in. Its headlights glared straight into my face, blinding me, and I had to shield my face with my hand. The car stopped about 10 meters away from me. The door opened, and Park Min-jun stepped out. He was the same old man, still handsome and handsome. His hair was neatly combed back in a designer suit. But his smile was no longer there. In the only dim light in the area, I could clearly see the tense, cruel, razor-sharp gaze on his face. He was no longer my husband. He was a predator stalking his prey. He stopped at a steady distance, his hands shoved into his pockets. "You're early, Min-seo." His voice was cold and emotionless. "You were punctual too," I replied, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "I've prepared what I want," he said with a contemptuous sneer. "Negotiation. Do you dare to negotiate with me?" Tell me. Where's my evidence? Give it to me. Then I'll consider my way out. A way out? I laughed. It was a sarcastic laugh. Was it the lifeline you gave to Yoonjia, Heyran, and So Yeon? Or the lifeline you tried to give me on the operating table? Min Chun's face changed. He didn't know I knew so much. How much do you know? He growled. His hands in his pockets felt like they were clenching. I know everything. My voice became uncharacteristically fearless and firm. I know you're a conman and a serial killer. I know you murdered 3 innocent women under the same scenario and stole their insurance money. And it's true, I almost became the 4th victim, Mr. Park Min-jun. Min-ru remained silent. He no longer denied it. His silence was a confession. So, after a long time, he finally spoke. His voice became vicious and brazen. Even so, if you hadn't escaped today and died peacefully on the operating table, everything would have been fine. Why did you insist on surviving and dying this painful death? He admitted. He said it all himself. The recorder inside me must have recorded every word, without missing a single word. My mission is complete. I think you can kill me. I looked him straight in the eye. There are people all around here. I said that deliberately to see his reaction, but he burst into laughter. Yes, I can't see anyone, but you can scare me. Minseo, you're still naive. You made a fatal mistake, coming here alone. After saying that, he pulled his right hand out of his pocket. What he held wasn't a gun, but a syringe filled with a clear liquid. Do you know what this is? He smiled, the corners of his mouth curling up. Highly concentrated potassium. One shot and my heart will be instantly destroyed. No one will find a trace, and people will just think a mother suffering from acid reflux took her own life. Isn't that the perfect ending? He slowly began to approach me. His face, distorted by his demonic relationship, was fully revealed. I stepped back. My heart felt like it was going to burst. Even though I knew the police were around, I couldn't help but feel fear as death stared me in the face. Goodbye, my dear wife. He lunged at me, his arm holding the syringe raised high. The 5 billion will finally be mine. At that very moment, the sharp needle was inches from my arm, and a dangerous cry shattered the silence of the night. Don't move, it's the police. Dozens of black shadows emerged from all directions in the darkness. Flashlight beams illuminated the entire area like a dagger. The barking of a police dog echoed. Minju turned in shock. His face instantly changed from a look of awe to one of utter terror. He had never imagined that the Dutch he'd set up was actually meant for him. He turned and tried to run, but it was too late. A detective rushed in like lightning, knocking him to the ground, sending the syringe flying out of his hand. Park Min-jun, arrested for attempted murder. 2 cold handcuffs fastened around his wrists. The devil was finally caught in the law's net. I stood there, my legs giving out, almost collapsing. It was truly over. A police siren blared, breaking the silence. The flashing lights illuminated Park Min-chun's face, twisted in shock. He was pinned down by 2 burly detectives, his face pressed against the cold, dusty floor. A syringe filled with lethal poison lay nearby, silent evidence of the brutal murder plot that had just concluded. I stood there, still trembling with fear. The sharp needle, just moments before, so close to my skin, would haunt my nightmares for a long time to come. Sujin rushed over, draped her thick coat over my shoulders, and hugged me tightly. It's over, Minseo. It's truly over now. You're safe. Hearing my friend's voice, all my strength and suppressed emotions crumbled within me. I cried out loud in his arms. Tears of fear, anger, and relief, escaping the brink of death. One of the investigators who had been with us from the beginning approached. He looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and respect. Mr. Lee Min-seo, you were truly brave. Now, please go to the police station and give a detailed statement. Everything was recorded, but an official statement is needed. I nodded and quickly wiped away my tears. As I passed Min-jun, Supported by the female officers, he raised his head and looked at me. His eyes were no longer filled with anger, but with extreme hatred. It was the hatred of a trapped beast. "You set me up," he shouted. I stopped and looked him in the eye. My voice was cold and firm. "I didn't set you up. I only sought justice for myself, for my child, for Yoon Jia, and for all the innocent women you deceived and murdered. You have now paid for your crimes in this place." After saying those words, I walked away without looking back. That night at the police station, I gave my full account and submitted the most crucial piece of evidence, Park Min-jun's confession, a miniature tape recorder. His wife's confession contained everything from his previous murders of 3 women for insurance money, to his plot to kill me while I was on the operating table, to his plan to eliminate me that very night. Faced with that recording and the attempted murder for which he was caught red-handed, Park Min-ju had no escape. He completely crumbled. The cold-blooded pride of a murderer vanished, and he was reduced to a miserable criminal, weeping and begging for leniency. And his confession exposed a horrific criminal network. He hadn't acted alone. To commit a murder disguised as medical malpractice, he needed the help of medical professionals. That night, emergency arrest warrants were issued for Dr. Kim, who had performed Yoon Jia's surgery, and Dr. An, who was supposed to administer my anesthesia. Driven by greed, the two of them sold out their Hippocratic oath and their consciences for the large sum of money Min-jun promised, becoming accomplices. They were butchers in white coats. The psychopathic handsome husband case shocked not only society, but the entire medical and insurance industries. It exposed the flaws and dark corners of a system where profit could be made at the expense of a baby's life. The media covered the case extensively, and the face of the perfect husband, Park Min-jun, no longer a subject of praise, but a demon in human form, a serial killer, graced the front pages of every newspaper. His true face was revealed to the world, and the perfect scenario he had painstakingly constructed for years was shattered. He must have thought himself a clever man, capable of controlling everything and manipulating the fates of others. But he forgot one thing: the net of heaven, though wide and sparse, never fails. No matter how cleverly concealed, sin is ultimately revealed to the light, and the guilty will sooner or later face justice. This time, the devil of the play truly descended, and there was no more opportunity for him to act. 6 months after that fateful night, the trial of Park Min-jun and his accomplices began. It was a trial that captured the attention of the entire society. Countless reporters and the victims' bereaved families filled the courtroom. I was there, no longer a trembling victim, but a witness denouncing the crime. In the defendant's seat, Park Min-ju looked 10 years older. Her former gentlemanly and cool demeanor was gone. Her eyes were piercing, and her gaze wavered with anxiety. Her accomplices, Dr. Kim and Mr. An, also bowed their heads, unable to meet anyone's gaze. As the trial progressed, Min-jun's crimes were mercilessly exposed, layer by layer. The evidence collected by Soo-jin, myself, and the investigative agency was undeniable. With the existence of life insurance contracts worth a fortune, the opaque flow of funds, the testimony of Nurse Hana and Yoon Jia's parents, and, crucially, the recording containing Park Min-chun's own confession, he could no longer make excuses. His entire hunting scenario was clearly reconstructed. He confessed to plotting to exploit women for money, fueled by his gambling addiction and extravagant lifestyle. He sought prey online, entering single women's communities and groups for women in difficult circumstances. He deceived them with his looks and flowery speech, promising them love and family. And when they completely trusted him and became pregnant with his child, he took action. The parents of the first victims, Harin and Soyin, also appeared in court. They sobbed as they listened to the murderer calmly recount how he had cold-bloodedly murdered their daughters. Their tears were belated, a sorrow that no amount of thought could ever fill. Finally, after several days of trial, the court delivered the most severe and just sentence. Park Min-ro was sentenced to death, the maximum penalty. on charges of organized serial murder, sophisticated and brutal fraud, and theft of property. Dr. Kim and Dr. An, accused of being accomplices to the murder, were also sentenced to life imprisonment. It was a fitting end for the demons who had betrayed their conscience and medical ethics. As the verdict was announced, the courtroom erupted in a flood of emotion. The cries of the victims' families mingled with the applause of the audience. Jang In had finally been realized. I sat in the witness box and watched Minjun being led away. My heart felt strangely calm. The light of justice, though belated, finally illuminated and comforted the souls of those unjustly killed. A few months after the trial, I gave birth to a healthy, beautiful son. The moment I held him in my arms, I burst into tears again. They were tears of happiness and gratitude. My son, my sweet angel, was the most precious gift to me, the most dazzling sunrise after the terrible storm of my life. I decided not to let the dark past dictate our future. I sold the house filled with false memories, moved to a new place, and started over from scratch. I visited Nurse Hannah and expressed my deep gratitude. I even used some of my money to help her open her own small clinic. Her courage deserved to be rewarded. I also created a small charity fund named after Yoon Ji-ah and the other victims. It aims to help single mothers in difficult circumstances find a way to sustain themselves and ensure that no one else will fall victim to the devil like Park Min-jun. My story, which began with false sweetness and almost ended in bloody tragedy, finally ended in the light of justice and hope. I want to express my deepest gratitude to Seogin, Nurse Na Yoon-jia's parents, and to all those who bravely fought for the truth. They taught me a precious lesson, that when we stand together and dare to speak out, no evil can prevail. Now my days flow in peace. I have my son by my side, good friends, and meaningful work. I have weathered the storm and finally found my own dawn, a dawn where there is no more deception or fear, only true love, the light of justice, and a firm belief in the goodness of humanity. Dear viewers, my journey, filled with tears and fear, yet also resilient, has reached its final chapter. Now, sitting on the warm embankment, looking at my son, gone, sleeping in his crib, my heart is still filled with mixed emotions. The pain of betrayal by the devil in the guise of a perfect husband and the disgust at his sins will likely never completely fade. It will be like a deep scar etched into my soul, a permanent reminder of the nightmare from which my mother and I narrowly escaped. But viewers, those scars no longer hurt me. Now, when I touch them, I feel only an immense gratitude for the power of motherly love, the strength of a woman, and the good that still exists even in this turbulent world. My story is perhaps the most costly and brutal lesson in faith. In love and marriage, faith is the foundation, the glue that binds two people together. I once believed. I trusted my man absolutely and blindly. I entrusted him with not only my heart, but also the lives of me and our unborn child. But that very faith nearly killed us. I realized that while faith is necessary, cool-headed reason and judgment are even more crucial. We shouldn't be blinded by sweet words or perfect care. True love must be built on a foundation of sincerity and good character, not just superficial glamour. We must always maintain a degree of discernment and healthy skepticism so we can spot cracks and anomalies before it's too late. Sometimes, a little doubt can be a lifesaver in our lives. And the second lesson, a lesson I learned at the risk of my life, never ignore a woman's intuition, especially a mother's. The moment I decided to trust the whispers of a strange nurse, it wasn't a decision based on reason or evidence. It was entirely a choice of my heart, my instinct. It was a human instinct to sense danger, and a mother's instinct to protect the small life in her womb at all costs. I believe all of us women are endowed with this miraculous sixth sense. It could be a sudden ominous premonition, an unfounded anxiety, or a strange dream. Don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss it as useless. Listen to it. Trust the voice that resonates deep within you. Sometimes, intuition can be the only light that illuminates the right path through the thick fog of lies. My story is also a heartbreaking testament to the boundless nature of human greed. Park Min-joon, he wasn't born a devil. He was probably an ordinary person. But greed, the desire for quick and easy wealth, turned him into a monster. He was ready to trample on all moral values, using love as a tool and the women who trusted him as expendable tools to achieve his goals. He built his wealth and career on the graves of innocent people, on their blood and tears. And ultimately, that very greed became the grave where his own life was buried. This is the law of karma, reaping what you sow, it never fails. No matter how cleverly a sin is hidden, it will eventually be exposed and punished by justice. But viewers, even in the deep darkness of sin, a glimmer of goodness and courage shone through my story. That was Nurse Hannah, a young woman with no power or background. She dared to stand up against evil, kneeling to save 2 lives she never knew. Her actions taught me a profound lesson. Goodness lies not in status or wealth, but in each individual's choices. Between choosing safety through silence and speaking out for justice, she chose the more difficult and dangerous path. She was a true angel of the white flag. Not only did they use their medical skills, but they also used their conscience and courage to save people. And there's my best friend Sujin. In my most difficult moments, she embraced me without hesitation, and with her expertise and sharpness, she joined me in my quest for justice. And there's Yoon Jia's parents. They were simple, rural people, but even amidst the grief of losing their child, they bravely spoke out for justice so that no other woman would suffer the same tragic fate as their daughter. They all showed me that no matter how cunning or cruel, the solidarity of good people can ever overcome. When we stand with each other and dare to speak out, no evil force can be defeated. Now my days flow in peace. I have a son by my side, good friends, and meaningful work. I've weathered the storm and finally found my own dawn. A dawn where there's no more deception or fear, only true maternal love, the light of order, and a firm belief in the goodness of humanity. I want to say this to all women. Always love and believe. But love with discernment, choose carefully and trust with care. Always maintain your inner independence and resilience so you can stand strong no matter what storms may come. And remember, you are never alone. There are still many warm hearts around you, ready to lend a helping hand. What matters is that you dare to speak out, seek help, and fight for your own life. This is the end of my story. I sincerely thank all the viewers who have listened to me and sympathized with me. Although my story was sad and painful, I hope it serves as a warning and a source of strength to others, especially women. Always cherish your own life and never blindly place your trust in others. If you find this story meaningful and if it resonates with you even a little, please feel free to like it and share it with your loved ones. And please subscribe to our channel, Leisurely Old Age. Your support is a powerful driving force that allows us to continue creating stories filled with more truthful and valuable life lessons. Well, I'll see you again in the next story.